Howdy friends, and welcome to The Ungentle Art. This is an introduction and overview of slap bass fiddle playing. We're going to take it for granted that you already have a bass fiddle, that you've been playing for a while, and you've already got a basic understanding of basic theory and left-hand technique, but what we're going to be concentrating on today is the right-hand technique of slap bass fiddle playing. My name is Mark Rubin.
My name is Kevin Smith.
And today we're going to begin with a general overview and a few examples of playing styles, so let's get started. Well, I play on a steel string bass. It's just a plain old plywood bass. I found that fine basses, like carved basses, usually don't have a really good tone for this kind of music. When you beat on so hard on them, you usually end up wrecking them. So I've got just a plain old standard plywood American-made bass. First thing that you want to do is you want to get your action jacked up as high as you possibly can. To do that, you're probably going to need to get adjustable bridge rollers. Like these here, you go to luthier and have them fitted like that. And also something that I've learned is that if you have steel strings, it's important that you probably want to figure out some way to reduce the tension of the strings so that you won't be beating your hand up too bad. So I had a luthier install what's referred to as a tension block, and that's located right down here. Now some people swear by them, some people swear at them, but I sure have enjoyed mine. That reduces the angle of the string when it comes over the bridge, and it sure has helped me out as far as my slap technique goes. It ruins arco playing, and it does affect how your normal pizzicato works as well too. But it really has worked out well for my slap technique. Also, a little trick that I learned from a guy who'd been playing for a long time is that steel strings are designed to be bowed. Obviously for what we're going to be, our purposes, that's not going to work. So you get what they call a solo set. These are strings that are designed to be tuned up a step, and then you just go ahead and use that same string and tune it down. It'll say on the string package tune up to F sharp, but you leave it there at E. So you get much more play out of the string, and you reduce the amount of tension that you're going to end up on your fingers. Once again, I recommend that if you do get a set of strings that are steel, you stay away from any of the strings that are orchestral gauge, or even those that say light gauge. Demand a solo set, because that way you'll get a lot more play and a lot less damage, and eventually that'll you'll thank me for it, basically. Also, steel strings have a tendency to really tear into your fingerboard, because part of the slap technique is coming down onto the fingerboard. So you want to make sure that the fingerboard is very well glued, and that you have an ebony fingerboard. Now, if you have a cheap K bass that has like a light rosewood or a maple fingerboard, you'll end up tearing up the fingerboard really bad. So I really recommend ebony fingerboard, or if you can't afford that, get some kind of a coating on the fingerboard that'll make it last a little longer. So that's just a few of the hints on the steel string. As for gut string, I'll pass it over to Kevin.
Okay, I use a set of gut strings. Basically, these two are a copper wrap on gut, and these are just plain gut. You can get sets that have full gut E and A's. Those sound really good, but you do lose a lot of tone on the lower notes. So I tend to stay away from those. Now Mark has a tension block down there on the bottom. I don't use anything like that, because with gut strings the tension is a lot lighter. Okay, so you have a lot more room. That's one of the reasons I like gut strings. They're not near as hard on your hands. So a good set of gut or nylon strings really work well. I also have the bridge adjusters on here, which really help with getting the tension up high enough and getting the strings up high enough to get underneath and grab. And I keep these on here. These keep the strings from getting worn, and it also keeps the strings from wearing into the bridge. You can wear really bad grooves into your bridge. So these come with most set of strings, so I think it's a pretty good idea to use them. I guess that's it. We'll get on to the other business right here quick. As far as pickup goes, there's a lot of pickups on the market right now. There's all kinds of bass pickups. What you don't want is a pickup that works like an electric bass pickup magnetically, that's going to pick up the vibration of steel strings. Because when you do the kind of percussion that slap bass has with steel strings and a magnetic pickup, you don't have any tone. It's just all lost. So this is like a transducer pickup. This is a pretty standard upright bass pickup right now. They fit down in the clips of the bridge here. You have to file your bridge down maybe a little bit so they just fit in there snug. I've got some tape in there to hold it in. This one I leave out. It sounds better. I don't know why. There's no reason for it, but it just does. So I leave this one out. It clips on down here. You plug in. Then after I go through the pickup, I go into an EQ or some kind of preamp. You really need something like this because if you go straight into an amplifier, especially a high-powered amplifier, you're going to get instant feedback and you'll have no tone control at all. So if you use some kind of EQ or a preamp, that'll keep you from feeding back. You can also boost certain frequencies to give yourself a little more sustain, which sometimes you'll need with gut strings because they don't have a lot of sustain. I want to talk a little bit about posture right now. You see a lot of bass players, especially when they start out, who keep their basses really low to the ground. That's when you do something like that, you're wasting a lot of energy. You waste a lot of energy leaning over and trying to get your arm to come back to the fingerboard. You're not going to have time to get it back. It's going to ruin your time, and also you can develop lower back problems and shoulder problems also. So you need to keep the bass up a good height. Most players I've seen keep it up pretty high. I keep mine just a little bit. The nut is a little bit above eye level. So this arm is almost straight, and this arm is really comfortable at about that height. So you can either, keep your elbow sticking out a little bit, and that way this arm isn't going to be down here to where you have to counteract the energy. One of the things you want to remember with slap bass is it looks a lot harder than it is. Once you get a little bit of the energy going, it'll sustain itself so you don't have to work too hard.
There's some certain unique problems in properly amplifying slap bass technique. Anyone who has an upright bass knows it's rather difficult to amplify it in the first place. Kevin and I both use a similar bass rig. We use a transducer pickup which attaches to the bridge, and also I have found, like he has, that deadening one half of the pickup works real well to give you a more natural tone. Once again, it's very important that you use some kind of a preamplifier. I cannot stress that enough. If you're going to, even if you're about to go into a sound system board or an amplifier, in any situation, you need to have some kind of preamplification. The other thing that needs to be noted is that the majority of the sound of the slap bass is not coming primarily from the bridge. It's also coming from the percussive attack on the neck, on your fingerboard. So for instance, Kevin, when he performs, has a microphone placed right here to pick up that sound. I'm not so patient. I have a microphone that's attached. I have it wrapped in foam, and as you can see, it's taped under here, wrapped in foam. It's just a standard cheap lavalier microphone, and I run a whole nother input for that so that we get the actual tone of the instrument and the percussive sound. And it's good to, it's otherwise, if you are going to amplify yourself, you need to cover all the sounds, otherwise you're going to be up on stage raising a racket and no one's going to be able to hear it. Once again, it's also very exciting to see that there are so many new transducer pickups and pickup microphone combinations that are available on the market today. So it's worth experimenting a little bit before you just jump in and get one particular pickup. Shop around, ask a lot of questions. Different people like different pickups. It just so happens that Kevin and I have the similar kind of rig. But I guess now that we've got that taken care of, we'll move along to actual performance. Well, let's get started on some on the basic technique. We'll begin with the actual plucking of the bass. This will be one half of the actual slap sound. The idea is to take the string up off the fingerboard. Now, in a normal pluck, you'd just be plucking with your fingers like this. But the slap technique comes around and uses the same portion of the finger, but you kind of glance and pick the string up just barely off the fingerboard, allowing it to smack back onto the fingerboard. That's where you get that sound. It's also important to try not to come straight up off, because you get kind of an odd tone, and also that breaks up the energy that you're trying to get by going in kind of a circular motion, and it keeps your rhythm even also. You'll see what we're talking about when we get rolling. But the idea is to just pluck it lightly. It doesn't have to be really hard, but to where you're getting that smack. What we'll do now is we're going to show you actually a little performance of the single slap. This is where you're using that plucking technique that we showed you earlier, to where you're just coming down a single time to get that single smacking sound. This may be familiar on old jazz recordings. The great Wellman Browd, who played with the Duke Ellington Orchestra in the 20s and 30s, and Milt Hinton, who played all the way up through up to today, developed this style to get a louder sound to where they could be heard over a big swing band. And what we'll do is we'll just give you a little example of that over just a standard jazz progression. Okay? 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4.
This is going to be an example of like a Chicago blues kind of bass sound with Willie Dixon doing the single slap technique on a fairly slow blues. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now once you've got the single slap technique pretty well down, we can move on and kind of add something new. I call this a duple slap, though it's not quite. It's where you kind of double the beat and you're coming down on the fingerboard a second time to get another percussive sound, kind of like a snare drum, as if the first pluck is a kick and then the slap becomes a snare drum. A good example of this you'll find in a lot of old-time country western music back before they allowed drummers. For instance, bands that played on the Opry couldn't have a drummer, so the bass player was supposed to take up the slack. So what we'll do is we'll play kind of a Hank Williams sound in a little groove, and you can see what we're talking about. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Let's break that down and analyze just exactly what we were doing there. You're going to be using that single slap technique to get the actual smacking sound off the fingerboard, and then you're going to come back with your hand rhythmically to provide another sound. So let's slow that down real slow so where you can see what we're doing. As you can see in that earlier example that I kind of exaggerated the sound of the hand coming back down on the fingerboard, but it's really important that you get that tempo even. You need to come down evenly every time so that you're
providing a real good rhythmic bass for the rest of the musicians. Remember, you're providing the bass and the snare as if you were a drum kit, so you have to be very careful that you're making an even stroke every time around. And also, to give you some context, I'll show you how that sounds a little bit faster. You'll see a lot of bluegrass bands, when they really want to get push up the drive, push up the energy level, they'll have the bass player do a number where he's really slapping really hard. So here's an example of that same slap, a little more in context. Are you ready? 1, 2, 3. You can see how I'm also still using the single slap in context and adding the double slap for rhythmic emphasis.
Okay, what I'm going to show you now is a different version of a double slap kind of thing. This is kind of a looser style. It's similar to what Bill Black did with Elvis on the Sun Sessions. So this is a pretty standard thing. It's good to know. Okay, what we're going to do now is kind of a variation on somewhere between a double and a single slap. It works really good for like honky-tonk shuffles, and it also works really good in like heavy blues shuffles. So we'll try a little bit of that now.
As soon as you get your ears tuned to that slap bass sound, you begin to recognize that it crops up in all kinds of different music all over. Here in South Texas, where we live, we have the Tex-Mex Conjunto that they have down in San Antonio, and one of the great pioneers was the great Don Santiago Jimenez. Much like Bill Monroe, he revolutionized the form by setting a standard ensemble, and he added the string bass. Down in San Antonio, they call it El Tololoche. What it means, no one's quite certain. I guess it's kind of Spanish for doghouse bass. And I'm honored to play with Santiago Jimenez Jr. these days, playing in the old style tradition. So what we'll do is we'll play a polka and give you an idea of how this slap technique works in that particular music. Vamos.
Okay, what we're going to do now is kind of a variation on the double slap. What it does is it changes the timing up, so instead of it being like a one and a, like this, we're going to even out the timing in between the note and the two slaps, so it's more like like that, okay? So once you get this going, you can use it like a drum roll, and it's kind of like a triplet then. So instead of being like this, it's more like, okay? It's like a triplet. Once you get that going and you can do a whole bunch of those together, it sounds a lot harder than it actually is, and it really looks and sounds great. Okay, what we're going to do now is I'm going to show you a little bit of a practical application for the triplets. So what we'll do, we'll just play a pretty straight boogie, and then I'll go into the triplets so you can hear what that'll sound like. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, what we're going to do now is I'm going to show you a little variation, another variation on the triplet. And what we do with this is we kind of work it up into a rumba kind of thing. And it's a really nice sounding groove. Okay, when you're doing a rumba like that, one thing you need to remember is you can't go straight out and then come back. You have to keep your arm and your wrist loose to keep the energy naturally flowing and to keep you from kind of stalling out on that last beat where you're leaving that slap out. And you also want to notice that when you're doing something like that, it kind of helps if you move your hand up and down like that. It helps even out your timing. It also looks nice, too.
So now we come to that part where we're going to try and put all the aspects together. We're going to try and use all the different techniques that we've talked about in the context of a performance and then hopefully a hot solo. So hit it, boys.
1, 2, 3.
See? It's easy. In that solo there, I introduced a new embellishment that we haven't talked to before, so let me show that to you now. Once you get down to where you're getting the rhythms going and you've got your rhythm pretty easy and you've got your hand moving, sometimes you'll find neat little rhythmic tricks that just kind of come to you, kind of the same way when a snare drummer first learns how to do a roll, little things will come to him. It's a similar analogy. So in that last solo, I did something kind of like this. let's break that down to where you can see what I was talking about. What you do is that you come down, you pluck, and come down, hit with a different portion of your hand, kind of like the palm of your hand and then the fingers again. So it's, and then you can speed it up.
Okay, what we're going to do now is we're going to show you how to play a super fast rhythm. You have to have a little more control, and you can kind of mix the styles up too. It doesn't have to be solid 2 beats all the way through. You can switch back and forth. So let's go ahead and do just something really quick.
1, 2, 3.
Now, all slap bass playing doesn't have to be necessarily flashy. You can also provide a great amount of rhythm, even on a slow tune. Take, for instance, a waltz.
1, 2.
Okay, well, now we'll try a tune that we showed you earlier. Here's another kind of a solo and performance on kind of a jazz chord progression. So go ahead, boy.
1, 2, 1, 2, 3, yeah.
Okay, what I'm going to show you now is kind of like a funky kind of jungle groove thing. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start out playing it real simple, and then I'm just going to add more embellishments to it and just make it more intense as we go along, and just kind of see what happens. It's improvised, and there are no rules, so let's try it. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, here's another soloing piece with on an old guitar instrumental tune.
1, 2, 1.
Okay, what we're going to talk about right now is kind of a touchy subject. Playing slap bass is kind of like wielding a knife or something, you know. I mean, you can do a lot of things with it, but sometimes just the fact that you have a knife is a lot more important than ever using it. So what you want to do is, if you get a good groove going, instead of being, you know, if you have a good groove going, instead of going all the way through, it'll be a lot more effective when you do throw in one little embellishment to spice up one certain beat or something than it is to bulldoze your way through an entire piece. Taste is really important. Be sure you work with the other rhythm players. The best thing about upright bass is you can get these really heavy, great light grooves. You have to be really careful. Make sure that's happening. When you have that happening, then you can go crazy on the solos. You can do entire rhythmic pieces throughout an entire song, you know, if it's part of the song. Be creative, be careful.
One thing I think it's really important to note at this stage of the game is that a lot of this performance style looks a lot harder than it actually is. The sound of the smacking and the hand coming down on the fingerboard can look really brutal and violent, and it's kind of flashy, and Kevin and I probably go out of our way to make it look like it's a little more violent an activity than it actually is. But something that both he and I have had to put up with when we first started learning how to play is overextending ourselves. And you can actually hurt yourself if you're not careful. I know, for instance, I suffer from carpal tunnel syndrome, so it's important that you keep your arms limber, that you're not tensed up like Kevin has been pointing out, that you have a more natural approach to the instrument and you keep your hands as natural as possible, because remember, you're going to be putting yourself through a lot more abuse than you're probably used to, so it's going to take your body a while to get acclimated. You know, for instance, I suffered from blisters really bad. I know Kevin did too.
Yeah, I've had my share of blisters. I've just playing along and not, like Mark said, not having anybody to really teach us how to do this, we kind of learned the hard way. When I used to play, I used to keep my hand really super tight and keep this thumb out of the way up back like that out of the way, and eventually what happened is I pulled this tendon along here, and that put me out of work for about 2.5, 3 weeks, which is not a good thing. You have to learn how to relax. Don't tense up. It's really easy when you first start playing to really tense up and grab it and try to stay really on top of it. And that's fine because you can kind of develop a feel for the kind of quickness that you need, but you don't want to tense up your shoulders and your hands. Make sure that you're not doing anything super uncomfortable. It's just like, you know, playing drums or anything else where it's really physical. You'll develop the muscles and calluses that you need but it takes a little bit of time, and it's a gradual process.
Yeah, it's over time. You're teaching your body the kind of technique that you're going to be doing, and for a little while it'll be painful and it'll be difficult. But don't push, don't overextend. If something hurts, you should stop. For instance, I've done serious ligament and tendon damage in my hand that jeopardized my long-term playing just from the first time I started playing. I didn't have anybody standing around telling me to take it easy. So I guess that's what we're trying to say is listen to your body. This takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of effort. It will come after time, but you need to start slow and then build up. And for instance, a little what you're going to have happen is you're going to start to develop calluses on your hand in places that you haven't had calluses before. If you play bass fiddle at all, you know that you'll have developed calluses on the tips of your fingers. But now you're playing with more of your hand, and your hand will have to get used to the fact that it's going to need to toughen that skin. It's very important that you keep your hands moisturized. I use a moisturizer every day, and that if you do start to develop calluses at the inside knuckles there, they will begin to tear into the skin if you don't keep them good and trimmed and filed back. Any kind of a manicure file works real well, especially in cold weather. You don't want to have your hands dry up.
And also, yeah, don't wash your hands right before you go on stage to play, because that'll dry your hands out, and whatever moisture your hands will have will get sucked into the fingerboard and the strings. And that's a great way to just to ruin the calluses that you've worked so hard to get to where you need them. To have them gone all of a sudden can be a pretty disappointing thing.
And also, a lot of bass players that we know also tape their fingers. They use a kind of a sports tape. And when you start off, I really recommend that any portion of your hand that starts to hurt, that you go ahead and try and protect it. Make sure it's a kind of a sports tape that won't come off in your sweat, and that won't stick to the fingerboard or stick to the strings. Johnson & Johnson Coach tape works real well. Experiment and figure out what works for you. For 2 years at least, I had to tape up every night, and I played five nights a week. So it's only after 7 years of constant playing have I gotten to a place where I can actually not have to tape up. And in fact, I have a blister right now, and so for tonight's gig, I'll be taping up for that one. Here's a little finger tape trick I learned from an old bluegrass bass player in Austin named Jerry Lightstein. It's done me real well. He says take a roll of Coach tape like yonder, Johnson & Johnson Coach tape, and you just pull off, it's about 4 inches, you just, actually pardon me, 2 inches, and you just pull off 1 inch of it, and you pull off about this much of the tape, right? And then you take the end of it and kind of make yourself a little pad. Fold back about 4 times to make a little cushiony pad out of tape, and then you place it on your finger wherever you got a blister or whatever. Notice how I'm laying it with the tape coming over the top of the finger. That way when you wrap around, there won't be a place for the tape to come off onto the string. And so now you're ready. You got a nice finger tape, and if you got a blister or something, that'll protect you, and that won't come off while you're playing, I guarantee. But once again, I guess what we're trying to tell you is we never had a videotape we could go and buy to have someone to tell us to maybe relax. Just relax, work on it little bit by little bit. Start with the basics, go back to the basics with the first pluck, and then move forward. You'd be surprised what'll come just out of the serendipity of playing all the time. Who knows, maybe you'll come up with your own slap bass style, because Kevin plays in one style, I play in my style, and that's one of the beautiful things about this instrument, is that any style that comes up that works for you is fine. So maybe you can make your own videotape and we'll buy it. Well, there you have it, friend. Thanks for spending the time, and just take your time and start from the beginning, roll back, and keep at it. That's the deal. Keep playing, and on behalf of myself, Mark Rubin,
and Kevin Smith,
thanks again for spending time with us, and man, have a good time playing. 1, 2, 3.